today. We are going to pop over to Ireland, and hopefully on the end of the line is David Jennings. Good morning.
Good morning.
I know that Catherine is dying to speak to you. She's talked to me all morning about it. I can't wait to get David on. So, cue Catherine.
We'll just go straight into the fact that Navan is your local track.
It is indeed, yeah. Navan is it's only about 2 or 3 miles down the road from me here, and I suppose I'd be pretty biased, but I would be a keen believer in that it's one of the best jumps tracks in Ireland. Unfortunately, the car today probably isn't as high quality as it will be later in the year, but it gives us an appetite for something later on in the season.
And Dave, just obviously people watching this in the UK might not be familiar with Navan's characteristics. Can you just describe it a little bit for us?
Yeah, I suppose I often remember talking to Noel Mead about 3 or 4 years ago. Obviously, he's chosen track as well. He always said to me that the one thing about Navan is that it's very, very similar to Cheltenham in that it's got a real arduous kind of uphill finish, and it's a real jumping track. If you don't jump well, you're really in trouble, and it's a long home straight. You have to stay. Stamina is crucial. You know, if you've got a short runner, trainers are not going to bring it to Navan. You really get found out. If you have any chinks in your armour, you get found out in Navan. It's a real strenuous home straight.
Obviously, there's, like you said, this card today is just, this is the first meeting of the jump season, isn't it?
Yeah, we've had a few meetings during the summer in the flat, obviously, but it's the first jumps meeting in Navan, and you know there's not going to be any horses from today that are going to end up with Cheltenham later in the year. But you know it's pretty interesting.
So you go on. We've got the Fortria on the 10th of November.
Yeah, the Fortria on the 10th of November. It's always an interesting race. We had Flemenstar there last year, and I think that's, well, obviously we don't know now with Tony Martin, but I think that probably might be the starting point for Flemenstar again this year. So it's always an interesting race, and especially this year, if Flemenstar turns up this year with Tony Martin, I think the eyes of the nation will be on him.
Cheers, Tom. Cheers.
And you go the Troy Town on the 24th of November.
Yeah, the Troy Town, I always remember growing up, the Troy Town was probably my favourite race. Kind of a friend of mine was involved in a horse, his father was involved in a horse called River Tarquin, I remember years ago, and you know, it was always, I remember being a little kid, it was probably my first bet back in a horse called River Tarquin in the race, but it's grown to be a really competitive handicap, and it's one of the early season highlights, especially in Navan.
Okay, what we'll do is just get your thoughts quickly on the Navan card in a minute, but I know Tom wants to ask you about the reserve system in Ireland.
Yeah, basically for the viewers at home that don't know about it, and obviously in England we don't have that system in place. How does that work in Ireland with the reserves?
Yeah, basically what happens is, like today, it's very interesting today, and even later on in the card, a mare called Lillian Killarney, I give a chance, and she's third reserve, so I'm obviously looking to see if she's going to get in. But really what happens is, today, in a lot of cases, you have 3 reserves in the races. So they get up until, you know, an hour before the first race when the read comes through in Ireland. Obviously, if there is non-runners and then one of the reserves is declared, the reserve will get in, and it just depends really. It's last-minute stuff really, and it's caused quite a stir really in betting terms, because a lot of the bookmakers, I think maybe William Hill and a couple of other bookmakers, kind of, they pay out if you're second to a reserve, they pay it out as a winner. So it causes a lot of problems really with people who are having a bet and a reserve wins a race. And obviously this year it's been huge in Ireland, because in the Galway Plate, Carlingford Lough was a reserve and got in. And then again in the Kerry National, we had a reserve again, Desi Hughes' White Star Line winning, and even Wise Oscar, who went off favourite for the race, both of them were reserved. So it's causing a real stir to them, and I think something is going to have to be done, because it's creating havoc that shouldn't be there, and it seems far more simpler in England.
Yeah, I would say, regarding obviously horses that don't get in, obviously they have a lot of travel expenses with getting to the course as well, and obviously with the entry fees. How does that work there as well?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure really. I'd say it's a case of, I think a lot of trainers would obviously ring around, and especially for the big meetings, they might ring around and just suss out if there is non-runners. But just say today, I presume it's a case of they get a phone call maybe, you know, a couple of hours before the race, and they have to decide whether they're declared or not. So if you are actually declared and a horse is taken out, then obviously the first reserve gets first preference. If the first reserve is not declared, then the second reserve gets preference, and so on. So that's the way it works really. So often the first reserve will get in, but it's very seldom really that the third reserve or the second reserve would get in.
Excellent. So Dave, just very quickly, best chance on the Navan card today?
Yeah, it's fairly trappy now. I think that there's a very interesting runner in the first race today, actually, a horse called Salam Aleikum. It's been well backed this morning. I backed it at 4-1 this morning. John Egan trains it. Barry Geraghty's riding. This horse was rated 91 on the flat, which is interesting. And the favourite in the race, Donatus Comet, was only rated 75. It was 9-2 very early doors, 4-1. I think 3-1 is the best price now. I think this could go off a fairly short price favourite. I'd be surprised if it was even 2s on course with Barry Geraghty booked. But probably the best bet on the card, I'd go for maybe in the third race, the Shaw Grawn. I was very keen on his chances in Listowel, but it jumped terribly that day. Just couldn't really. It actually is quite a decent jumper when he gets it right, but just made a couple of mistakes at crucial times. And I think at around 5-2, I don't fancy the favourite Manila 5-0 at all. I think he's one to take on. So I think the Shaw Grawn in the third race is probably the one for me today.
And David, obviously we've been on air for about an hour now, so I haven't caught up with any non-runners or anything at Navan. Are there any through?
Well, there's none through at the minute, but I think the interesting thing today is it's absolutely lashing rain here at the minute. Now, the ground is going to be really quick. I think it's officially good. The fairmen have been watering, but it's given a pretty wet day all day here. So it'll be interesting to see if the rain does get into the ground. And if it continues the way it's raining at the minute, I'd imagine the ground is going to get pretty soft, and we would have a fair amount of non-runners. And it's interesting, the last race today, a horse called Gold Boy from Willie Mullen's stable. Patrick is actually not riding that, and he's on the favourite Western Boy for Pat Fahey. So I wouldn't be surprised if Gold Boy is a non-runner. I'd say that might have been declared an error or something like that.
Okay, because I actually, in the 220, in the maiden hurdle, I actually I've got to wait for one to come out, but Slango Foil of Gordon Elliott's, have I said that right?
Well, it was quite a good effort. Better than some commentators in England, I'd imagine.
Tell me what it means, because when you land on an Aer Lingus flight, they say that.
Yeah, it's Slango Foil.
That's it. Yeah. And is that something to do with safe onward journey or something like that?
This feels like an Irish exam now.
Sorry, I should have told you.
It's actually buy for now, so it's like buy.
Yeah, because they say safe onward journey, Slango Foil.
Yeah, I think it's buy for now. Well, that's what I was brought up thinking it was in school, and nobody really kind of said it wasn't that way. But it's Slango Foil. So if you went anywhere that was a Gaeltacht area or an Irish area, and they were saying goodbye or see you later, it's kind of Slango Foil. So yeah, I think a bit of practice in that pronunciation catching for later in the day.
Can I just ask you, David, before we let you go, over the sort of the month of October, what meetings are you looking forward to on the jumping side?
Yeah, I love this time of year. It's real, from a punting perspective, it's very dangerous because obviously you're coming back in and fitness is a key issue. But there's a couple of great meetings that I'm looking forward to. Next week we have a race in Goran Park that Sizing Europe returns in every year, and he's returning again this year. And I think Ruby Light might be running against him. I remember a few years ago I really fancied Ruby Light to beat Sizing Europe and had backed him, I think maybe 7-2, 4-1, and he was about 20 lengths clear at the last and fell. So that's always an interesting race. And it's a kind of, that's the one meeting I always think is a starting point for the jump season, because Willie Mullins, obviously Goran is his local track in Kilkenny, so he targets that meeting with a nice kind of bumper horses from last year that are running the maiden hurdles, and I always think that's the one that really gets you excited. And then you're going into the first meeting of the year in Cheltenham, obviously over in England, where there's actually quite a few. In recent years we've had quite a few Irish runners over that have been running over the summer, so they'd probably be the two meetings for me that I'd be most looking forward to.
Okay, lovely. And David, before we move on to Market Raisin, is there anything you fancy today at Navan?
The only race I had a look at last night really was the 325, the Albany Hurdle. With what you're saying though, Dave, I was quite thinking the top one, Landero, was an each way bet to nothing in the race. I wasn't massively taken with Silver Tassie's jumping on the last couple of occasions, but if that rain gets in, I don't think it will increase Landero's chances. What did you think?
Yeah, I had a good look at this race yesterday, and I started off on Landero. Landero's a real interesting horse. I was in Roscommon the day at 1, and I remember talking to Robbie Power afterwards. It was well back that day. It was 10-1 in the morning. Backed into, I think it went off 5-1 and beat Court and Catcher. It'd be useful, the yardstick now. But if you watch the race, I've never seen a handicap hurdle won so far out in a race, because he was absolutely tanking and won so easily. And I was talking to Robbie Power afterwards, and he goes, I never really knew anything about this horse, he said, but he absolutely loved the ground. He said the one thing was, it was actually the hottest day of the year in Ireland that day in Roscommon, and he said the ground has to be quick. Yeah. But I think it's going to be very hard for Landero today, because first of all, he has to give he has to give £9 to Silver Tassie. He's rated £7 inferior, so he's £16 worse off with Silver Tassie. I just think this is the time of the year to catch Noel Meade's horses. Noel always thought an awful lot of Silver Tassie, so he did. So, I don't know, I just thought that was a good run behind lots of memories. 13-8 it was this morning. That's gone now. It's evens and odds on in a lot of places. I just think the judges are going to say Landero will find it really difficult to give £16 to Silver Tassie, theoretically. So, I'd say Silver Tassie is probably the one to sway with. I agree with you. If the rain doesn't get into the ground, 13-2 each way looks a big price about Landero, especially if the three places remain.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, David, for your time. Hopefully, we'll get you on again soon. I appreciate you getting out of bed and getting onto the show.
Yeah, I hope Catherine's Irish is a bit better now next time I come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll see you in November, Dave.
Bye, Dave.
See you guys.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.